Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
Tomorrow's Romance Dawn, Old Version, by OtakuWithHazelEyes. The Straw Hats have left Drum, ready to take on Baroque works in Alabasta. However, upon making a pit stop at a mystery island, they come across something they never expected to find: an older Zoro. Now they must locate the future crew, as well as keep treasure out of the hands of bounty hunters. Adios.
At the time a certain ambush was in effect. A certain straw hat-wearing pirate captain was napping. No, not the one who was still recovering from his fight with the red-eyed sniper, swordsman. He was unconscious, not napping. The one that everyone to this very moment was wondering what in the name of Whitebeard's epic mustache was he doing. Well, he was napping. Pay attention. You would nap too if you had been off adventuring in the jungle for countless sunrises and sunsets. Future Luffy, for all his energy, had to wind down eventually. He followed the path set for him by the trees for hours, coming across weird plants, big animals, and even a lake. The lake had a sea king in it. Luffy had no idea how a sea king could even get in a lake, so he declared it to be a mystery and went on his way. Sometime after that he'd eaten a couple of Sanji's box lunches, then settled down for his nap. The nap he was now awakening from. Luffy opened his eyes and sat up, adjusting his hat. Something felt off, somehow. That one big voice, he thought. It feels agitated, but why? Did someone knock over one of the trees? The answer to that latter question was yes, and it was way more than one tree. Not that he knew that. Luffy stood up and dusted off his clothes. He could wonder what was bothering the big voice later. Right now it was best to keep moving, though he was starting to get the sneaking suspicion that the trees weren't leading him back to the Thousand Sunny. He would have just used his haki to find his friends, but the annoying big voice was still making hearing difficult. So following the tree path was his best option. Luffy caught sight of the clear path and once again began to walk it. Odds were he would run into one of his crewmates eventually, right? For all he knew, Zoro had gone and gotten himself lost again. Zoro had a knack for finding things when he got lost. The rubberman continued down the path, picking up a walking stick somewhere along the way. Just because he was lost didn't mean he wouldn't indulge in a man's romance, which required hikes and long walks to have walking sticks. Eventually, he noticed that the trees were growing thinner and the terrain became more elevated and rocky. Going a little farther, Luffy soon found himself in what appeared to a quarry, in the sense that he was surrounded by cliffs and rocks. In the center of the clearing was one large rock covered in painted images. Luffy walked up to it and stared at the images. Sun, he muttered, pointing to it. Moon. Tentacle monster. Rolled up piece of paper. Spear. Eyeball. His finger landed on the last picture, star. If anyone had been watching him guess what those images were, they wouldn't be sure as to why he did it. Maybe just to confirm his interpretation aloud. Luffy wished Robin was with him. She would like these weird pictures. Maybe when he found her he could. Bang! Luffy felt something enter his shoulder, stretch out the spot, and shoot something back out. Without even blinking, he turned around in time to see a random man go down. Apparently he hadn't been expecting his bullet to fire back at him and embed itself in his leg. In the few short moments he had been looking at pictures, Luffy had been surrounded by a medium-sized group of men and women. All were stony-faced and serious, thus making Luffy conclude that they were boring right off the bat. Still, it was odd he hadn't sensed them coming. Then again, the big voice was still muffling everything. Figures the new guy would be the first to screw up, one woman snickered. Yeah, everyone knows Straw Hat Luffy ate the gum-gum fruit. Bullets won't work, a man added. Should have used haki, another said sagely. Luffy said nothing and continued to observe them. Now, men. There's no need to be so harsh, Baga, a throaty voice broke in. The voice's owner moved to the front of the group. We've all made rookie mistakes, Baga. The voice's owner was a shirtless fish man wearing baggy trousers, the pant legs tucked into a pair of combat boots. He had a round build, but was by no means fat. The roundness came from muscle. He had cropped blonde hair, sleek brown-black skin, spiny fins on top of his head and going down his back, a blunt nose, and sharp needle-like teeth peeking out from under his top lip. His most odd feature was a long flap of loose flesh starting from the hollow of his throat and ending just above his navel. Unit Leader Percy. The men and women cheered lovingly. Percy grinned at them, showcasing more of his needle teeth. This made all his subordinates wince, because the smile was incredibly creepy. Percy, leader of the Carrion Bounty Hunters Alpha Unit. Black Swallow or Fishman. We'd gotten a report from Ms. Yari saying that the Straw Hats were here on the island Baga. Percy continued. But I never thought we'd actually run into the Captain Baga. Today's our lucky day, Baga. Luffy cocked his head to one side. Baga? No, I said. Baga? It's my verbal tick. Percy snapped. So-called verbal tick, missing. He glared at his men. Why didn't anyone tell me it sounded like the word baka? You really seemed to like that one, unit leader, one man admitted. We didn't want to rain on your parade. Well, now I have to choose a new one. Again, thanks a lot, the fishman grumbled. Ooh, how about Niku, Luffy suggested, waving his arm back and forth like a third grader. I don't want suggestions from you, Straw Hat. You just ruined my last one. Percy then crossed his arms and closed his eyes, clearly moving into deep thought. After a few seconds, his eyes opened again. Okay. I'm ready now, comma. You're going to pay for ruining my tick for me, Straw Hat, comma. Luffy didn't really care, but if this guy wanted to fight, he wasn't about to turn him down. He was getting bored anyway. Do it, boss, one alpha member yelled. Yeah, if you catch Straw Hat, Boss Carrion will have to make you a lieutenant, another cheered. Carrion? Luffy echoed. His eyes widened and he pointed accusingly at the group. You're with those rotten meat bounty hunters that attacked the Thousand Sunny, jerks. You ruined my verbal tick and broke our chain hooks, comma. Percy shot back. Do you have any idea how time-consuming it is to replace those, comma? That was a jerk move, so I say we're about even, comma. Luffy paused and cocked his head to the side again. Okama? Damn it, Straw Hat. Enraged, Percy charged at the pirate, fist black, and reared back for a punch. Even though he was on dry land, the fishman's speed was nothing to sneeze at. Luffy only had enough time to bring his own fist up and meet the punch, resulting in what had to be the Grand Line's strongest fist bump. Both were lucky they didn't break the other's knuckles. Percy wasted no time. Haki covered his foot and he rammed it into Luffy's side. The rubberman went flying, but he corrected himself mid-air and landed on his feet. Gum Gum Pistol. Percy avoided the incoming fist, rolling out of the way and landing in a crouch. He reared back his hand. Arabesque Brick Fist. Luffy recognized the technique named Jinbei used it, so it was a fishman karate move. More importantly, he remembered what it did. A shockwave rippled through the air in all directions. Armament. Hardening, Luffy called out. Haki coated his arms and he crossed them in front of his face, bracing himself. The shockwave didn't knock over Alpha Unit, which was impressive. They did, however, look annoyed that their leader used such a widespread technique so carelessly. Luffy's sudden use of Haki protected him, so the most done to him was him being knocked onto his back. He jumped to his feet and, keeping his arms Haki coated, began punching out. Armament. Gum Gum Gatling. Percy took a few good hits from the attack before moving out of the way by jumping into the air. He landed behind Luffy. The latter didn't hesitate and kicked out his leg. Gum Gum Whip. Percy jumped again to avoid it and thrust his elbow hard into Luffy's face. Luffy's head and neck stretched back, and as this happens around Percy's and coated his forehead with Haki. Gum Gum. Bell. Special Attack Herculean Swallow. As Luffy's head came into position, Percy opened his mouth impossibly wide and, the next thing Luffy knew, he was in some kind of warm, sticky place, almost like a filmy bag. The walls secreted wet stuff that burned. Ha! How do you like that, Straw Hat Bore? He heard Percy gloat. I'm a black swallow or fishman, meaning my stomach is bigger and can extend Bore. Your corpse will decompose before I finish digesting you. If anything, Luffy now knew what that loose skin on Percy's chest was. It was part of his stomach. I've been eaten. This hasn't happened since that snake from Skypia, Luffy thought. He paused. I wonder if there's any gold in here. Nami will want it. Unit leader, we need him alive to get the full bounty, An alpha member reminded the fishman. I know, Bore, Percy snapped back. At least let me digest him a little, Bore. I didn't have lunch, Bore. Luffy had no intention of being digested. It would be hard to be Pirate King if he were someone's food, after all. Taking as deep a breath as was possible considering he was in a stomach. It burning a little due to the stomach acid in the air. Luffy inflated his body. Gum Gum Balloon. On the outside, Percy was gloating to his subordinates when all of a sudden, his stomach grew even more bloated. They could actually see the flesh straining. Percy's stomach could hold a lot, but even he had his limits. His eyes bulging, the fishman began to gag. To everyone's disgust, he began to throw up. The bloating went down and out came Luffy, covered in slime. Luffy stood up, trying to shake the bile off. Ew, I got puked out. Percy was still standing, but he was wobbly. Vomit dripped out of his mouth and tears streamed out his eyes. Straw Hat. Bore. He coughed. Luffy glared at him. You know, you might have had a better chance of beating me if you hadn't tried to swallow me. Though you got through my Kenbunshoku haki with the eating me thing, so I guess that was kind of cool. Percy shot him a dirty glare. You bastard, Bore. Luffy cocked his to the side. Boring? Percy let out a frustrated roar and charge. Only to run smack dab into Luffy's extended fist. That proved to be the final blow, for Percy went tumbling into the painted rock then collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Luffy turned to look at the rest of Alpha Unit. He bowed, sorry for ruining his verbal tics. Don't apologize. Alpha Unit all took out their weapons, continuing to shout in unison, get him. It was no contest, really. These other members weren't as strong as Percy and Luffy dispatched them easily. He saw one of the men trying to make a snail call, but a quick gum pistol put an end to that. Soon enough, Luffy was surrounded by unconscious bounty hunters. I can't believe he didn't have gold in his stomach, Luffy thought. Now I have nothing to give Nami so she won't be angry at me for getting lost. GRWWLLL. Luffy looked down at his stomach, and then there was that. Man, all that fighting made me hungry, and I've only got one box lunch left. Luffy crossed his arms and raised his face towards the heavens. Hey, island, lead me back to the sunny already. I want my dinner, pause. And if you could help me find some gold, that would be good too. As if answering him, a wind blew and knocked his hat off his head. He scrambled to catch it, but stopped when he saw that it landed next to the painted rock. When he had knocked Percy into it, the rock had moved a little. Luffy could now see a kind of space underneath it. He walked up to it and pushed hard, moving the rock farther back until the space was revealed to be a large hole. A hole, huh? He said to himself, putting his hat back on. I should go down there? Another wind blew. Luffy usually didn't like being told where to go, but he trusted his gut and his gut was telling him to go down that hole, just as it did with the tree path. He was about to jump down when he thought of something. There were probably more of those bounty hunters out there. Robin had said they were good, and his crew may not know the hunters were there. Luffy shook his head and smiled. She. They'll be okay. My crew can handle a bunch of jerk rotten meat bounty hunters. Without a doubt in his mind, Luffy jumped into the hole. Like I said, I don't like writing fight scenes, mostly because I'm not good at them, but this was needed. I hope you liked Percy. For him I went ahead and looked up odd fish. Black swallowers are a type of deep sea fish and they're freaking creepy. Look up a picture if you have the time. Anyway, Luffy has jumped into a hole. What could happen next? Stay tuned. 2. Blah time. 1523 Alp, 1 year after the War of the Best. Location. Aboard the Silverback, ship of the Carrion bounty hunters. Is he in yet? Do you not have anything better to do than antagonize him? I'm a man of simple joys, little sister, and this is one of them. It is your funeral. Runo stuck his tongue out childishly at his sister and looked excitedly around the ship's large dining room. It had been exactly 2 weeks since he and Yari signed on to this bounty hunting crew. He hadn't wanted to originally, but it was impossible to argue with Yari once she got an idea into her head. Accept banishment without argument. Had to do it. Travel across the entire freaking Grand Line and go to the New World? Had to do it. Kill that guy from Baroque Works? Okay, that had been his idea. But he'd wanted to send the guy's hand to Mr. Zero, not his head. Even he had his standards. Even so, Runo was now pretty happy with the decision. The ship was nice. He got to fight pirates whenever he wanted. There were so many new specimens for his toys, and best of all, he just came in, if you were interested, Yari said, primly sipping a cup of tea. He got cheap kicks at the expense of Boss Carrion's first lieutenant. Runo hadn't liked the man when he first met him. He was way too serious and condescending. One of the main reasons Runo hadn't wanted to join at first. Additionally, the guy looked like he could have been Dracula's BFF. Yari claimed this wasn't so, having tested him with a mirror, crucifix, and garlic 2 days ago, but in the long run this didn't matter to him. While Runo found him creepy, he did give him quite an opportunity. Runo waited until the first lieutenant, Vaughn, walked past his and Yari's table with a tray of breakfast foods. He must have just woken up, given he was still wearing a long-sleeved t-shirt and pajama bottoms. He'd gotten in half an undercut a few days ago. Runo thought it looked stupid. Curling his fingers into claws, Runo stuck out his tongue and said, "Blah, blah." Vaughn stopped walking, shot Runo a glare, then went on his way. Runo snickered to himself. Did you see his face? Yari rolled her eyes. I will never understand why you insist on continuing with this juvenile behavior. It's because he clearly likes playing with fire. The twins looked up to see the mohawked second lieutenant of the crew, Arati. What are you rambling about? Runo asked her. You do realize Vaughn is the strongest member of the crew aside from the boss, right? Arati pointed out. Vaughn is one of the most even-tempered guys I know, but he told me he's been teased about his appearance for most of his life. If you keep this up, he's going snap. I hear he used to be a high-ranking Marine, Yari added randomly. You two broads just let me worry about the vampire, okay? Runo said. He turned to Arati. Also, if I want advice, I'll ask for it. Got it, hag. As soon as that last word left his mouth, an armored fist rammed into his face, knocking him from the table. I'm only 28. Yari rolled her eyes and went back to her tea. It was about time her brother earned a punch. She was just sorry she hadn't been the one to deliver it. Runo leaned against the ship's main mast, rubbing the fresh bandage on his nose. I still can't believe Sherumbled. I still cannot believe you are still going on about it. It was yesterday, Yari said, filing her nails. You really need to work on your hockey. He side glanced her. You know, you don't have to be here with me as I do this. She shrugged. I have decided that if or when Vaughn snaps, I want to be there to see it. Runo turned away from her with a pout, but perked up almost immediately. Vaughn and Arati were stepping onto the ship's main deck. So this guy really ate a random devil fruit and it turned out to be the snot fruit? Arati was saying, a disgusted expression on her face. Yeah, and to add insult to injury, his name was Petty Officer Schnoz, Vaughn went on, smirking. Ouch. That's just cruel and unusual. I know, I love it. Runo smiled, waited until Vaughn and Arati were walking past him, then whispered, blah, blah. Vaughn frowned and his eyes narrowed. Satisfied, Runo turned on his heel and started to walk away. He didn't get far because Vaughn hooked his fingers into the back of Runo's shirt, yanked him back, and made him look him in the eye. What are you? Runo began to protest. Vaughn smirked at him and stuck out his tongue. Blah, blah. With one mighty heave, Vaughn tossed Runo across the deck. The hypnotist ended up sailing right over the ship's railing. Crap! Splash! Runo! Yari cried out, running over to the railing. Vaughn and Arati joined her. Arati glanced down at the water, then looked at Vaughn. Was that really necessary? I supposed it was a bit uncalled for, Vaughn admitted. The ocean hasn't done a single thing to deserve Runo getting dunked into it. Arati had to giggle at that. Yari glared at them. Stop joking, Runo is a devil fruit user. He cannot swim, you have to save him. I'm a devil fruit user too, you know, Vaughn reminded her. I'm just as much of a bag of hammers as you and your brother. The two devil fruit users looked at each other, then looked at Arati. Arati looked like she had eaten something sour. Do I have to? Arati, Yari scolded. Fine, fine. Arati kicked off her shoes and stepped onto the railing. But I am not giving him CPR. That having been said, Arati dove expertly into the water. Yari patted Vaughn's shoulder. Good luck with that. What? Why'd I have to lip-lock Runo? Vaughn yelled. 1. You were the buffoon who threw him overboard in the first place. 2. I am his sister. So, I do not need those kinds of nightmares. Vaughn scowled and crossed his arms, looking away from the swordswoman. Yari studied him for a few seconds. You know, when Arati told us you would eventually snap, I was expecting a little bit more emotion on your part. But you kept your cool the entire time. Vaughn smirked. Runo's annoying, but he's small change compared to some of the people I've had to deal with. It will take someone 10 times more irritating than him before I ever lose my composure. And so far, I've only known one person who could do that. The odds of me meeting another one are practically nil. May I inquire who that person was? Yari asked in curiosity. The red-eyed man's smirk faded and he stepped away from the railing. It doesn't matter. He died a long time ago. Yari watched as Vaughn walked up to the mast and sat down, presumably to wait for Arati to return with Runo. I do not think I will ever get a read on that man, she thought. A.N. I did mention this happened back during the 4th SBS, did I not? Blah. Blah is a sound stereotypical vampires are supposed to make. Clearly, Vaughn is not amused. Also, if you recognized the ending, it was from an earlier chapter where Yari was in need of saving. Some things are just constant in a group. 3. The mysterious scar time, 1524 Alp, during the events of Film Z. Location: bathhouse, Seacon Island. Usopp yawned tiredly as he entered the baths, adjusting his towel. One day on this island and he was already exhausted. Nami hadn't been any help. Z burnt up most of our stuff, the pint-sized navigator said, hands on her hips. We need to make money if we're going to replace it all. I'm putting you in charge of figuring out how. Was it possible that Nami's bossiness had increased by being turned into an 8-year-old? Then again, little kids did seem to have that mindset where they want everything and it was the grown-ups' job to see those wants fulfilled, no matter what the cost. In any case, he hadn't met her demands yet, seeing as he had spent the day trying to find out more information about the Neo Marines. Robin said she would help him figure something out tomorrow. For now, he was going to take a long, relaxing bath without any disruptions, distractions, or... What are you guys doing here? The sniper hollered. As soon as he had entered the room, he was greeted with the sight of the monster trio, and Brook, at various stages of relaxation. Zoro and Sanji were loafing in their own pot like tubs, while Brook and Luffy were standing in a shallow bath and splashing water on each other. Why are you so surprised? Zoro asked lazily. The witch told us to lie low, so we figured we might as well do it here. Usopp's eye twitched. Wait, are you saying you guys have been in here all day? Of course not, Luffy said. We stopped for lunch at one point. They have great food here. And good milk, Brook added. Just look at how strong these bones have become. Usopp flopped over dejectedly. Leave it to these guys to go and have a bath day when everyone else was out doing real work. Oh, take it easy, Usopp, Sanji said. You keep being this stressed, you'll go prematurely gray. Take a load off and take a bath. Luffy ran over and tossed a bucket of water onto the long-nosed man. Water fight. Usopp sputtered and snatched the bucket from Luffy. This means war. In no time at all, Usopp, Luffy, and Brook were chasing each other around the room, tossing water into the others' faces and having a good time. Zoro and Sanji stayed out of it, but thoroughly enjoyed watching the proceedings. After a little while, all the spilled water resulted in the 3 pirates slipping and landing on each other in a giant heap. Thankfully, all their towels stayed in place. You guys okay? Sanji asked. Luffy stuck his thumb up into the air. We're good? The pirate started to get up, pushing Usopp's foot off his face, when he noticed something. Hey, oi, Usopp, what's this on your ankle? Usopp gave his captain a confused look. Luffy examined his ankle, and was soon joined by Brook. It looks like a bite mark, Brook observed. At least it does to my eyes, though I no longer have any, yo-ho-ho-ho. On Usopp's ankle was a faded scar, not very noticeable unless you were looking at it closely. And sure enough, it was made up of small indentations that altogether resembled a bite mark. Oh, that, Usopp said. Yeah, I've had that for a while. It sounds weird, but I have no idea where I got it. Zoro walked over to the group, finishing tying a towel around his waist. How can you get a scar and not know where you got it? I know where I've gotten every scar on my body." Usopp stood up and glanced at the swordsman's scarred eye, wondering for the umpteenth time where he got that one. "That's very good and all, but I seriously don't know. I first noticed it when we were in Alabasta and I was pouring sand out of my shoe. I nearly had a heart attack because I couldn't think of a single plausible situation where I could have gotten it. Then the revolution happened and I kind of just forgot about it." Luffy stood up. "Maybe you were bitten by a fish. Sometimes when we fish they fight back. I remember this one time when I was just starting out I ran out of food. Then this huge fish jumped right out of the ocean and tried to eat me, and I was really glad when it did. I beat it up and ate it whole." "I am so dumbfounded, words fail me," Sanji deadpanned, also joining the group. "You do realize you could have died at any time without a proper supply of food and water, right?" Shi. Brook remained on the grower Usopp's ankle. "I don't think it was a fish." Luffy-san. "The marks are too flat. Whoever bit Usopp-san's ankle was definitely human." "Scar's not all that big, either," Zoro added, glancing down at it. "It was either someone with an unusually small mouth or a little kid." "I've heard of kids being called ankle biters, but this is just ridiculous," Sanji commented. "We sure Luffy didn't just try to eat Usopp in his sleep like he does with Chopper sometimes?" "Hey," Luffy protested. "I only do that when you don't let me have thirds at dinner." "I don't let you have thirds because we need to conserve our food when at sea, you numbskull," Sanji cursed. "Stingy." Zoro shook his head, interrupting. "It wasn't Luffy. If that were the case the scar would either be a whole lot bigger or Usopp wouldn't have a foot." Usopp held up his hands. "Look, does it really matter where I got it? It's not all that noticeable and I forgot I even had it until Luffy brought it up. It'd be nice to know, but I gave up trying to figure it out ages ago. Let's just get back to our baths, okay?" "Excellent idea, Usopp-san," Brook said. "Race you to the tubs, Luffy-san." "You're on," the rubberman said with a grin. Now that the great scar debate was over and done with, Usopp moved away from his friends and settled in one of the pots of water. Once he was relaxed, he slowly lifted his foot out of the water and gave his scar one last look. "I know I said I didn't care, but there is one thing I'd like to know," he thought. Usopp's brow furrowed and he grit his teeth. "Why is it when I look at this scar, I feel so annoyed?" One of my reviewers brought up the scar on Usopp's ankle a while back, so I used that idea for this omake. It will come up again later in the main story, but for now, I hope you enjoyed this. 4. Chronicles of Lone Wolf Von No. 2, of 2, time, 1522 Alp, a little more than a week before the War of the Best. Location: Grove 12, Sabaody Archipelago. Von was the wielder of the Chi no Mi, the blood fruit. He could control blood in its entirety, and even felt it as it flowed through his veins. Thus he knew it was safe to say he could feel it run cold when he read the headline of the newspaper a news coup had dropped a while ago. Whitebeard Commander Firefist Ace captured, slated to be executed in a week's time. It was official. The world government was made up of brain-dead ignoramuses with a collective death wish. They had had the gall to publicly announce the execution of an underling of the strongest man in the world. They had basically given Newgate the written equivalent of the bird, daring him to do something about it. They were declaring war on the Whitebeard pirates. Von felt lightheaded. He tossed the newspaper aside, pulled his cloak's hood over his head, and began to walk briskly towards the mangroves, ignoring the other people standing in abject shock at the news. This was really happening, and Von for some reason couldn't accept that. Attacking Whitebeard. It just wasn't done. Not unless you were some idiot pirate with too much ego and not enough common sense, and Von had come across enough of those over the years to know the type. While he was never overly fond of the world government and the Marines, he knew they weren't stupid even if they acted that way at times. There had to be a reason they were doing this now of all times. It couldn't have just been because they finally captured Firefist and decided to take the opportunity that had presented itself. That was the most sound theory, but it seemed a little much for just one of Whitebeard's commanders. Von thought back to the year's previous events. Crocodile's betrayal, the destruction of Eni's lobby. Were those the reasons? Everyone knew Commodore Smoker wasn't the one who beat the ex-warlord. No, that had been the handiwork of a rookie pirate. Von hadn't cared at the time, But in recent weeks he'd done his research and learned that the pirate monkey D. Luffy had had his bounty shoot way up after the incident and had even been spotted in Alabasta. It was hardly a coincidence, and it didn't change the fact a pirate did the government's job for them. Secondly, the destruction of Enies Lobby. Though Vaughn doubted the world government had given all the correct details, at the end of the day the WG's symbol of justice was still sitting at the bottom of the ocean. And once again, the Straw Hats were involved. Those kids really got around. The Navy's credibility and reputation was at an all-time low thanks to these events. Vaughn wouldn't dismiss the possibility that this execution was the Navy's last-ditch attempt to assert their power and authority. Or he could be reading too much into it and the reasons could be completely different. Honestly, Vaughn had better things to do than psychoanalyze the government. Whatever their reasons, things are about to get really crazy, the red-eyed man thought. I'd better lay low for a few days and wait for the situation to blow over. No need for me to get involved. Now that he thought about it, that invitation for him to rejoin the Navy with a shiny new promotion to Vice Admiral he got last week was suddenly making a whole lot of sense. The Navy was probably reeling in all their strongest guys in order to take on the Whitebeard pirates. Please, it would take a lot more than a stupid promotion to get him back into the fold. In his pondering, Vaughn had failed to notice he had moved into a more desolate part of Grove 12, and that the sun was beginning to set. He finally did notice and stopped, looking up at the sun. Yeesh, it's getting late, he muttered to myself. I'd better head back to Grove 3 and… Boom! The sound of the explosion was followed by the ground beneath Vaughn's feet shaking. What the hell? The bounty hunter shouted. He looked in the direction it came from. This is probably a bad idea, he thought, running towards the source of the boom. He made it there and he was sure to conceal himself behind one of the tree's massive roots. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but he sure as heck wasn't disappointed. The explosion had come from Bartholomew Kuma. At the sight of him, Vaughn nearly choked on his own saliva, who was firing lasers at a group of weirdos. No, wait, not weirdos. He recognized them from their wanted posters. These were the Straw Hat Pirates. At the moment, Kuma's head was smoking and there were arms growing out his neck. Vaughn assumed this to be courtesy of Nico Robin's devil fruit abilities. All right, a boy with a long nose shouted. The beam went off in his mouth, he self-destructed. Vaughn frowned. Self-destructed? They were talking about Kuma as if he were some kind of robot. Hold on, Vaughn thought. Wasn't Vegapunk working on a project to create special cyborgs for combat right around the time I left? That thing must be a pacifista. The pacifista fell to its knees and out of nowhere a crackling black cloud formed behind it. He could see cat burglar Nami swing an odd blue staff and from the cloud burst a large lightning bolt, striking the robot right through the chest. There was an explosion, and the pacifista was left smoking and sparking. It still did not fall though. It instead stuck out its arms and began to fire more energy beams, prompting the pirates to scatter in order to avoid getting hit. Judging by how it seemed to be doing this randomly, the robot's sensors must have been thrown out of whack from the recent attacks. Vaughn had to admit, he wanted to see where this was going. Since he wasn't a pirate himself, the Kuma lookalike wouldn't attack him, he hoped. From what he could observe, it looked like the Straw Hats were entering their endgame. Blackleg's leg was glowing red with heat and Pirate Hunter tied a bandana around his head and drew his swords. Blackleg ran forward and jumped into the air. Diabol Hambi. Flambage shot. He thrust his leg into the pacifista's chest, setting it on fire and launching it towards Pirate Hunter. Then, much to Vaughn's shock, the swordsman appeared to GND a multitude of extra arms and swords. How is that a thing? Vaughn thought in aggravation and with a bit of envy. Kiki Kutoryu, Asura, Pirate Hunter called out. The pacifista turned to look the three-headed pirate and prepared to fire another blast from its palm. Pirate Hunter swung out his blades and cut into the cyborg, 9 lightning flashes. The extra limbs and heads faded from the pirate's body, and it was clear damage had been dealt. The robot began to fall backward, blood leaking from its lips. Meanwhile, from above, a boy that could only be Straw Hat Luffy, geez. He even looked like Garp. How did no one else notice this? Inflated his arm to giant proportions while his crew cheered him on from below. Third gear. The rubberman shouted. He reared back his fist, gum-gum. The pacifista looked up at him, a laser charging to fire from its mouth. Luffy's inflated limb twisted like a corkscrew. "Do it, Straw Hat," Vaughn yelled in his head. Giant rifle. The fist came down on the pacifista, causing a shockwave and dust to fly everywhere. The fist was unwinding, actually drilling the robot into the ground. Vaughn had to wince from just looking at it. When Luffy removed his hand, the pacifista clearly wasn't getting back up. Vaughn watched as Straw Hat shrunk down to a comical size and the rest of crew took a breather from the difficult battle. He had to admit, these guys had potential. He had come across a lot of pirate crews, and while he didn't like pirates as a general rule, he wanted to see where these guys were headed way more than he had other crews. He could definitely see them as the people who destroyed Enies Lobby. Still, he hoped they weren't seriously planning on going to the New World after this. That would make Enies Lobby look like a trip to Cherry World by comparison. He contemplated just taking them on now and collecting their bounties, but he decided against it. They had just defeated a pacifista. After all, he figured they had earned a free pass. The universe, however, didn't appear to agree. Just when the Straw Hats were about to get off scot-free, another pacifista showed up. This one wasn't alone though. It was escorted by a bulky, axe-wielding man Vaughn recognized as the captain of the science force, Sentomaru. He remembered him from the times his marine ship had to visit Dr. Vegapunk in the past. The pirates demanded to know who he was, and Sentomaru gave away the information like it was candy despite claiming he had no obligation to reply. Still can't keep a secret to save his life, I see, Vaughn thought with a sweat drop. Some things never change. After giving his name, Sentomaru ordered the pacifista, PX-1, to open fire. The Straw Hats scrambled to escape the burning lasers, and as far as Vaughn could tell, they were going to split up. They probably figured that since they couldn't stay and fight they were much too injured and exhausted to take on another pacifista they could escape. PX-1 couldn't chase after all of them. Unfortunately, Vaughn knew what kind of man Sentomaru was. He would hunt them all down, no matter what the cost. Damn, Vaughn thought. I was actually kind of hoping to see where they would end up. That's life for you, I guess. Vaughn shifted his full attention to Straw Hat and Sentomaru. They appeared to be going one-on-one, but Straw Hat was getting his butt handed to him. It wasn't surprising Sentomaru was crazy skilled with Busashoku Haki, if Vaughn recalled the duels he had with him in the past. If he knew him, he was probably going to. Vaughn froze. This feeling, no, it couldn't be. Boom. Arg. Vaughn moved to another tree root and peered cautiously over it. Pirate Hunter was down, and standing over him was. What the hell is Kizaru doing here? The bounty hunter thought in panic, breaking into a cold sweat. In private conversation, Vaughn could speak of the admirals casually. If in the same room as them, he could act calm and focused, or even mouth off to them. But when alone and not being judged or appraised, he could freely admit that those guys scared the living crap out of him. He'd never liked working with them, or even being on the same ship as them. They were powerful and merciless, unwavering in their ideas of justice. The only admiral he'd ever felt remotely comfortable with had been Aokiji, and even then he avoided the man when he could. Never mind Akainu and Kizaru, he'd had nightmares about those two. There were many reasons why Vaughn had left the Navy, and the admirals were three of them. Ooh, you're a bit too late, Pirate Hunter Roronoa Zoro, Kizaru drawled. I'd heard you were a reasonably accomplished swordsman. But seeing as you were beaten with one shot, you must be pretty exhausted, huh? Vaughn clenched his teeth. This doesn't make sense. Why would Kizaru come here? They don't call him out unless one of the Yonko is on a rampage or some idiot celestial dragon hit their panic button. The hunter's red eyes widened. Shit. Kizaru lifted his leg above Roronoa, where it began to glow with a blazing yellow light. Take a rest, why don't you? Roronoa was a dead man, that much was certain to Vaughn. He was a dead man and soon the rest of his crew would follow. He knew that, as pirates, the Straw Hats had all of this coming, but for some reason it still left a bitter taste in his mouth. He was against killing personally, but he knew that in the world he lived in there were different types of kills. It was one thing to kill a man face to face in combat, but to kill someone who couldn't even defend himself. Zoro! The Straw Hat crew cried out. Vaughn watched as the Straw Hats made their futile attempts to rescue their comrade. Physical attacks passed right through Kizaru's logia body. Trying to roll Roronoa out of the way failed because the admiral moved as fast as light thanks to his glimmer powers. That, coupled with their desperate cries, made the whole ordeal painful to watch. Von knew what was coming, but he wouldn't look away. I won't turn my eyes, he thought, shielding his eyes from the bright light with his forearm. Those kids got this far. They deserve this much, at least. I won't let you get away, Kizaru said coldly. It's useless. You'll die now. Time moved in slow motion. The Straw Hats all rushed towards the admiral. Kizaru lifted his leg even higher. Von couldn't help but think if there was ever a time for divine intervention, now would be perfect. Shoom! Something blew past Von at an amazing speed. If his observation hockey weren't so fine-tuned, he would have never caught the smirk and gray hair that had filled his vision for all of 3 seconds. His jaw dropped. Dark King? It was him. Dark King went right up to Kizaru and kicked his leg, sending the attack meant for Roronoa flying into one of the mangroves. The resulting explosion shook Grove 12, but Von barely noticed. He released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He wiped sweat from his brow, muttering, "Cutting it a little close there, huh, old man? You just wanted to make an entrance." The Straw Hats would be fine now. Von adjusted his hood and ran away as fast as he could from Grove 12. He still didn't like pirates, but he had to admit, there was something about the Straw Hats that just made you want to root for them. What in the name of all that is sacred happened here? Von shouted. After getting a safe distance away from Grove 12 and recollecting his wits, Von had made his way to the only place a situation with the celestial dragons could possibly occur, the human auction house. It was practically night when he'd gotten there, but what he saw blew him away. It was a mess, to say the least. The building itself was falling apart and there were injured marines and nobles everywhere. Medics ran to and fro trying to offer their aid, but some of the soldiers were literally in pieces and complaining about it. Von wasn't even going to question that one. The bounty hunter caught sight of Disco, the auction house's manager, being next to the wrecked building. He didn't like the flamboyant man, but he wanted answers. "Disco," he shouted, speed walking to him. Disco looked up. "Be Blood King, what are you doing here?" "Call it idle curiosity. So, what happened? It looked like a giant ran over this place and soccer cleats." There was one giant, but he didn't do this. You see, we were having a splendid auction. We even had a mermaid. You'll be upset you missed it. Von crossed his arms. "You do realize I release all the slaves you sell me, right?" Disco shrugged. "Hey, what you do with them after purchase is your business. I just sell them." He wilted. "Or at least I did." Okay, this wasn't getting him anywhere. Disco was too depressed to be of any use. All Von had learned was that there had been an auction and going off all the wanton destruction. It had gone horribly wrong. He was about to find someone else to ask, when he felt a familiar chill. "Ooh, Von Kuhn. It's been a while." Von slowly turned around, only to come face to face with Admiral Kizaru himself. With him was PX-1. Wait, this one had paw pads. When did the real Kuma get here? Von swallowed but kept a straight face, removing his hood. "Admiral Kizaru. Kuma. Long time no see." "Not since you resigned," Kizaru mused. "Tell me, did you enjoy the show back there?" He knew I was there. It was quite an interesting spectacle. I'm almost upset that I didn't catch the end of it. If you don't mind me asking, what happened here exactly? Ooh, you don't know? The Straw Hat Pirates attacked this establishment and took a family of world nobles hostage. Then a bunch of other troublesome supernovas got involved and it escalated from there. Von raised an eyebrow. Seriously? That doesn't really sound like the Straw Hats' MO. The hostage part anyway. Kizaru shrugged. They are pirates after all. They can be unpredictable if need be. Just look at Kuma here. I wasn't expecting him to send those Straw Hats all flying. It took a few seconds for his statement to register with Von. Kuma did what? Sent them flying. They're probably all dead, Kizaru sighed. Kuma remained silent. Way to go, Dark King. You really dropped the ball there, Von thought with a scowl. Is something wrong, Von Kun? Kizaru asked. It's nothing. It's late and I'm tired, Von lied. He turned to leave. It was nice seeing you again, but I'll take my leave. Wait a moment. Von bit back a curse and turned back to the taller man. Yes? Kizaru smiled in a way that was in no way reassuring. If I recall, HQ sent you an invite to return to the Marines. Have you given that any thought? Vaughn smirked. Kizaru, when I left the Navy I spit on your titles and your so-called absolute justice. The only reason they want me back so badly is because they're challenging Whitebeard and they don't want to fail miserably. Can you blame them? Your blood abilities are extremely useful. He raised an eyebrow. You don't approve of the Navy's plans? I think it's a terrible, suicidal idea, but what do I know? I'm just a lowly bounty hunter. Vaughn answered dully. I don't get involved with the Navy's business. Fair point, Vaughn-kun. Fair point. Kizaru strolled past the younger man, followed by Kuma. Your loss, I suppose. See you around. Vaughn watched Kizaru walk off, and it wasn't until he and Kuma were out of sight that he allowed himself to fall to his knees, shaking from pure terror. Damn him, Vaughn thought, seething, damn him straight to hell. It took almost 10 minutes for the shaking to stop, but when it did, Vaughn stood up and put his hood back on. He couldn't bear to spend one more moment in this place. He made a beeline for home, but his thoughts were on everything that had happened that day. The announcement of the execution, the upcoming war, the Straw Hat's disappearance. Banu used to say he could feel when change was blowing in, Vaughn muttered to himself. I think I get what he meant now. Even when he would look back on this day years later, he would never comprehend just how right he was. A reviewer once noticed that I play with Vaughn more than I do my other OCs, and there's a reason. Out of my OCs, he's my favorite. He's just so much fun. 5. Siobhan's long day time. Morning at day location, Kala. Siobhan awoke to something pecking at her head. It wasn't horrible, but it was rather unpleasant. She wished it would stop, but that would require her opening her eyes and dealing with it herself. She lasted about 30 seconds before she gave in. The offender was some tropical bird that had somehow found its way into her house. She groaned and swatted it away. The bird flapped angrily and flew out her window. Yeah, you better run, she grumbled. How'd you like it if you were sleeping and someone pecked at your forehead? Birds always went for her forehead when her bangs weren't covering it. It was annoying, but it was an easy target. Yawning, Siobhan got off her cot and walked to her indoor fire pit. After lighting a fire, she set a teapot full of water on it and then grabbed a mango out of a bowl on a table. She bit into it as she stepped out onto her veranda. On her way out, she picked up a knife and carved another tally mark into her wall. Day 1205, she thought in monotony. It was a beautiful morning. It was mornings like these that made her glad she went through the trouble of building a treehouse, even if it did take her a year to complete it. It kept the rain off her head, she slept in it, it was a great place to keep her stuff, and she had the best view on the island. Siobhan took another bite of mango. I start the morning with a bird pecking my head. The village elders would have called that an omen. But is it a good or bad one? Meh, she never really believed in omens. She was the master of her own destiny. She ate the last of the mango and chucked the pit over the side of the railing. Yosh, she declared, putting her hands on her hips. It's a new day and I have loads to do. Let's get started. 1. Take a bath. Siobhan shivered as the small, cold waterfall poured overhead. It must have been winter in another part of the island, or the water would have been warmer. There has got to be a better way to wash my hair, she chattered. Once she was sure her hair was clean, she darted from the waterfall and dove under the water of the large pond the waterfall fed into. She made faces at any fish she saw, giggling to herself. Those fish could be really surprising if you didn't know they were there. Aye, Spaz shrieked, jumping out from under the waterfall. Something just swam between my feet. Straw Hat rolled his eyes and slid farther into the water. Relax, it was probably just a fish. Nobody asked you, you flashy moron, Spaz snapped. That was way too big to be just a fish. Actually, Straw Hat's right. It probably was a fish, Siobhan called down from the tree branch she sat in. The two boys stiffened and slowly looked up at her. They hadn't noticed her before now. Siobhan, they hollered, hands going to cover their private parts. Siobhan laughed and jumped down, wading into the water herself. No need to be shy. I have 7 brothers. You literally have nothing that I haven't already seen. That tears it. I'm getting out, Spaz yelled and started to leave the pond. Be careful, Spaz. The part of the pond you're standing in may go up to just your ankles, but some parts can be, Siobhan called after him. Spaz yelped and disappeared beneath the surface of the water. Deeper, Siobhan finished, slapping her forehead. Crap, I'll save you, buddy. Straw Hat took off his hat and put it on Siobhan's head. Here, watch my hat. Siobhan laughed uncontrollably, tugging on the hat as Straw Hat dove beneath the water to save Spaz. Siobhan broke the surface, then moved out of the pond and to the log where she kept her clothes. I'm clean enough, she said to herself. 2. Weed my garden. 1, 2, 3, Siobhan tugged, and at long last the stubborn weed came loose. Unfortunately, this caused her to tip backward, fall on her back, and land in her weed pile. Weeds flew everywhere. Siobhan spit one out of her mouth. This was easier when I had help. Like this, Siobhan? Captain Sama said, tugging up a weed. Siobhan walked by him carrying a basket of vegetables. That's right, very good. You know, I can do this myself. You're my guest, you shouldn't be working. Hey, you're cooking for us tonight. The least I can do is give you a hand. Siobhan smiled at him and looked at his weed pile. She frowned. Captain Sama, why is all my lettuce in the weed pile? Captain Sama looked at her, then looked away, whistling innocently. Siobhan looked at her lettuce, growing neatly in a row. She heaved a sigh. I don't really like lettuce either, she mumbled, rubbing the back of her neck. 3. Meditation. Siobhan did this for an hour. As usual, it cleared her mind and was boring as hell. 4. Go fishing. Amendment. Fishing cancelled due to sudden nightfall. Siobhan grumpily tossed her fishing rod to the floor of her treehouse and tossed herself onto her cot. This is the third time this week, she complained, flailing her limbs. I want fish. Damn it, stupid sky. Decide on night or day already. The moon's out, and it's only noon, Specs said, looking up at the sky. I've heard of islands where it's day 24/7 or night 24/7, but never night and day irregularly. You get used it, Siobhan told him. It's a pain though when it's sunny at night and I'm trying to sleep. And one time it was night for a whole week. I couldn't get anything done. How can you tell how many days have passed? He asked curiously. Easy. A clock washed up here a while ago, so I just used that, she replied. Specs side glanced her. Isn't that cheating? I thought you were a shaman. This coming from the pirate? Specs laughed. Siobhan lay still in her cot. She placed her forearm over her eyes. I think I'll take a nap. 5. Take a nap. She napped for roughly 2 hours. When she awoke, the sun was back out. She no longer felt like fishing. 6. Sort through the stuff I have that washed ashore. Siobhan picked up a diamond necklace she found in her unsorted pile. What do I need a diamond necklace for? She thought aloud. I suppose I could use it to bribe someone later down the line. She tossed the necklace into the accessories pile and continued to sort through her items. She had been letting it pile up for weeks now. An alarm clock? She had 5 of those, so trash. Part of a cannon? Trash. A big white coat with broomy things on the shoulders. Keep. If she could paint over that stupid seagull on the back. She could dye it to look like Captain Sama's. Various nails and wood. Keep. She could use those to repair her treehouse. A top hat with goggles. Keep. She thought it looked funny. Siobhan came to a big black cloth. She pulled it free from the pile and saw it wasn't a cloth, but a pirate flag. But not just any pirate flag. Really? I can keep this? Siobhan gasped, holding the flag up. Sure, Captain Sama said, ruffling her hair. I wouldn't be much of a friend if I didn't give you something to remember me by. Siobhan's lip trembled, and she threw her arms around Captain Sama's waist. He was taken aback for a few seconds, but after that he eagerly returned the hug. You will remember me, won't you, Siobhan? He asked her softly. She nodded furiously against his stomach. Good, then you get to help keep me alive. Siobhan put down her hammer, finishing nailing the flag to the wall of her treehouse. I can't believe I forgot about this, she said, running her fingers over the Jolly Roger. And here I promised him I wouldn't forget. 7. Since I didn't fish, go to the beach and dig for clams. Siobhan dug almost violently in the sand. She was pissed beyond all reason. Stupid bird, stupid omen, stupid memories, she ground out through grit teeth. She threw her arms up into the air. Today sucks. She couldn't do a single thing without her subconscious dredging up memories of happier times with Captain Sama and his crew. Even digging for clams brought forth things she'd rather not think about. Wow, look at all these. There are so many, Siobhan said cheerfully, gazing at the mountain of clams she had dug up. Let's bring them to tonight's feast, Satatya suggested. No, race you to your village, he challenged, running past her. She grinned. You're on. No, wow, Siobhan. You really want me to have this? Satatya asked, gazing at her gift in wonder. No take-backs? Siobhan smiled sadly. No take-backs, I won't need it where I'm going. No, I promise. Siobhan, Satatya screamed as she sailed away. I promise, I'll save you one day. No matter how long it takes. No, Siobhan shrieked, yanking her hair in frustration. I refuse to think of Satatya and Calypso on top of everything else today. I just wanted today to be a good day. I don't need this, I'm not lonely, I refuse to be lonely. Siobhan's cheeks felt wet, and that was when she realized she was crying. Wiping away her tears, she went back to digging, almost robotically. She did this for 2 hours, she didn't find a single clam. She was about to get up and leave when she abruptly looked up from where she was digging on the beach. A cold shiver ran down her spine, and she looked out towards the fog, which always hung around the furthest border of the island's waters. She could hear multiple voices within its expanses. Visitors are coming, Siobhan whispered. So, Kala had revealed itself yet again, and just a week, possibly, even with a clock time was hard to gauge on Kala, after Captain Sama had taken his leave. This was the quickest it had ever happened. She usually went months between visitors. This time was different, however, she could feel it in her bones. This was only beginning of a much larger event. Siobhan stood up, dusted off her clothes, and grinned. Yosh! Let's get started. It was absolutely amazing how one's plans could go so horribly wrong so fast. Robin, Roranoa, Brooke, and Usopp stood silently across from the violet-haired wild man, who was still waiting for a response. They were partially wondering how he managed to sneak up on them, and partially wondering how he had woken up when his tent was on the other side of the camp. Sorry guys, Tony whimpered weakly in Roranoa's arms. He got the drop on me, I never even heard him. I am deceptively light on my feet, Runo said before any of the pirates could respond. I am also a deceptively light sleeper, and I have haki that has finally worked around the island's dampening effect. So if you're wondering how I found you so fast, there you go. Roranoa gently passed Tony over to Usopp, then put a hand on Shisui. Robin crossed her arms, and Brooke scooped up one of the fallen guard's swords. Ah, you see, I was hoping you would want to fight. I wasn't joking when I asked if you had any ideas, Runo shrugged. I mean, it would be devastatingly easy to just use hypno-trance and make you surrender willingly. But my duel with the cyborg notwithstanding, I haven't had a decent fight since we got to this stupid island. Since I refused to let the old hag, the vampire, and my sister have all the fun, I am open to suggestions if you have them. He grinned slyly, looking like a snake. Just know that this is my game we're playing, and I don't take kindly to losing. Talkative bastard, aren't you? Roranoa commented. Hold that thought. Runo closed his visible eye and raised one hand to his face, sliding the appendage under his bangs that covered his other eye. With one swift movement he brushed the bangs back, revealing the hidden eye, and once revealed, his eye went from bright green to a solid swirl of rainbow color. After a few seconds, the eye returned to normal and his bangs fell back into place. What was that? Robin thought. Creepy. Usopp and Tony thought. Sorry about that, had to check something. Runo apologized. As for you, Pirate Hunter, I do like to talk. Artie would say it's because I like the sound of my own voice. And I will neither confirm nor deny that. But I'm getting off track. Runo lifted his hands to the center of his chest and began circling them around each other. As he did this, a swirl of color emerged from his palms, illuminating the dark night. It's time for my allotted playtime, and my patience is limited. Robin didn't know what he was doing, but she wasn't about to let whatever it was succeed. Trace Fleur. Arms bloomed out of Runo's body and held down his upper arms and head, startling him and making him lose whatever he had been creating. Clutch. Runo's torso was forcibly bent backward, but unlike when Robin did this to other people, there was no resounding cracking noise following it. The hypnotist didn't even cry out from being forced into what would typically be a painful position. I'm sorry, but was that supposed to accomplish something? Runo said boredly. What the hell? Usopp shrieked. Roronoa and Robin shushed him. I suppose this is why Frankie-san referred to him as a jelly-boned freak, Brook whispered. I don't care if he is jelly-boned, we need to take him out before the rest of the camp wakes up, if they haven't already, Roronoa growled in a low tone. Brook nodded and the two swordsmen charged, blades drawn and ready to attack. Robin, Tony, and Usopp hung back for now, though Robin made more arms sprout from Runo in order to keep him in place. Runo simply flexed his muscles and her flower limbs burst into a shower of petals. Vivi had been right, they could see his lean frame betrayed his immense physical strength. Robin bit back a shout of pain from her bloomed arm's sudden destruction. Robin! Tony cried out. Now free, Runo ran forward to meet Roronoa and Brook. The two swordsmen moved so that they were on either side of the hypnotist and swung. Runo simply lifted his hands and the swords met with the metal bands around his wrists. The blades were stopped dead in their tracks. Grinning, Runo shoved the pirates back, making them stumble. Roronoa recovered the quickest and immediately went on the offensive, slashing furiously. Runo met each strike with one of his wristbands. Even attacks from odd angles were met as the hunter showed off his extreme flexibility. You thought you had an advantage because I was unarmed, didn't you? Runo taunted. Dude, I spar with my sister almost every day. I know how to fight a swordsman. Having fought Sanji over 1,000,000 times, he actually didn't think that, not that he thought Runo cared. So Roronoa stabbed at the hunter's face. Hypno real. Runo called out and set off a large swirl of his colors, causing the younger man to miss by a fraction. The feral man then dropped to the ground and kicked Roronoa's legs out from under him. As the swordsman fell, Runo rammed his foot into the former's back, sending him flying into the air. Roronoa had to grit his teeth to keep from crying out. This freak kicked almost as hard as the cook, he was lucky his spine hadn't snapped. Runo thought. He should have stopped, not missed. The effect must have been weakened by him being a cyclops. I'll remember that. Zoro-san, Brook shouted, forgetting to use his comrade's new name. He began stabbing rapidly at Runo. Poka Ramais. Runo maneuvered around the skeleton's jabs. The attack was obviously not as potent as usual, since it wasn't a blade Brook was used to. Runo released a hypno reel around his head and moved to palm thrust the musician in the face, but quickly had to block another aimed stab. Huh? Why didn't you? Runo began to ask. Those colors are lovely, but they are visual hypnosis, Brook explained. I have no eyes. Runo snarled and let the blade's next stab slide along his left wristband. Smirking, he locked his arm around Brook's. He then pulled him close so that they were nose to nose, not that Brook had a nose. If I recall correctly, you're the guy who one-upped my sister, right? Runo asked with strained politeness. Sliced her up and knocked her into the ocean? Vivi-san did that second part, actually, Brook admitted nervously. Just checking. Runo bent backward, lifting Brook into the air and flipping him over his head. Just as Roronoa was finally coming back down, the two pirates collided and went tumbling onto the ground. When they finally stopped rolling, they were so tangled up in each other they couldn't get up. Zoro, Brook! Tony cried out. He jumped out of Usopp's arms and ran at the bounty hunter, Kung Fu point. Tony! Robin called out. Take Usopp and find the others, Tony ordered. Your powers don't work on him, so I'll help Brook and Roronoa. Robin nodded and grabbed Usopp's wrist, dragging him as she began to run. Tony leapt and prepared to shove his hoof into Runo's throat. Runo grinned and snapped his fingers, causing a burst of rainbow light. The reindeer's eyes widened, his attention completely ensnared. It didn't last as Runo crescent kicked him in the jaw. The little doctor crashed into the pole Brook and Usopp had been tied to. Dang it! Tony thought through the pain. It's just like earlier, that rainbow haze distracts and keeps me from fighting properly. Sorry Fluffy, that was a reflex, Runo apologized. You said that form is called Kung Fu point, right? Let's see it. Tony watched as Runo shifted into a strange stance. His knees bent and he put his body at a weird angle. He also raised his hands, one hand higher than the other and keeping his palms level with the ground. Looking at him, the reindeer couldn't help but think of a cobra getting ready to strike. Shaking off the pain from his impact, he rushed him. Hi-ya! Tony yelled, punching and kicking and jumping around the violet-haired hunter. Yaw. Yaw. Hi yaw. Letting his haki come into effect, Runo deflected each punch and kick. His arms and legs were like liquid, adjusting smoothly with each movement to just the right position to thwart Tony. It was like trying to hit a Writhed the Snake comparison, Chopper thought. But everything about this guy makes me think of them. Runo drew one palm back. Dancing Cobra. Cloven Cross, Tony shouted, putting his hooves together and pushing them forward. The hunter thrust his palm, still level, at the reindeer, 12 miles per hour strike. The tips of his fingers met Tony's hooves. The reindeer cried out as he felt his arms be forcibly pushed backward, and he swore he saw cracks form in his hooves. He reverted back into Brain Point as he went barreling into Roronoa and Brooke, who had just managed to untangle themselves. Like a bowling ball hitting a set of pins, the two swordsmen were once again knocked to the ground. "Oh no, Chopper," Usopp said worriedly, looking back toward the duel. "Did Runo just say, Dancing Cobra?" Robin asked, coming to a sudden stop. Usopp looked at her suspiciously. "I think so, why?" Robin looked grim. "Dancing Cobra is a rare Alabastan fighting style, but I never heard of someone actually using it. It's meant to mimic the movements of a desert cobra, and is incredibly difficult to master. You need to be ridiculously flexible to wield it to its full potential. Considering you tried breaking his back and he didn't even blink, I'm going to say he's plenty flexible," Usopp snapped. Robin frowned and began running again. "The style is very dangerous. Taking that into account, I suppose, Dancing Haze fits him more than we assumed." "Excuse me?" Robin and Usopp skidded to a halt. Runo was standing in front of them, hands on his hips and scowling. "How did he?" Usopp started to scream. Robin quickly bloomed a hand to cover his mouth. It was a miracle no one else in the camp had awoken, so they needed to maintain covertness. "Did you just call me Dancing Haze, Devil Child?" Runo asked in a dangerous voice. "Yes," she answered slowly. Runo stomped his foot. "Ooh, I hate that name so much, it's so lame. I wanted to be called Snake Charmer. But by the time I finally thought of it, that godawful epithet had stuck. Just for that I'm punching you in your upper abdomen." "That's so specific," Usopp shouted in horror. Actually, considering his mouth was still covered, it sounded more like Tush Ho Hefifif. Robin crossed her arms. "Dose, first though, time out." Robin actually stopped when Runo held up his hand. He proceeded to lift his bangs again, and his eye lit up with multicolored light. After a few seconds, the light ceased and he let his bangs fall. Why did he do that again? Robin wondered. "They've made good progress," Runo said to himself. "WHM made good," Usopp stuttered, "time in." As promised, Runo plowed his fist into Robin's upper abdomen before she could react, while at the same time kicking Usopp to the ground. Robin coughed up saliva as she went flying. Right into Roronoa and Brooke, who was carrying Tony, who had been running over to aid them. They were knocked over, again. Roronoa jumped to his feet, growling, "This is just humiliating." "Robin-san," Brooke said, standing up, "are you alright?" Robin stood up, cradling both her stomach and Tony. "I'm fine," he was holding back. "But I'll have some fantastic bruises in the morning." Tony sniffled, looking at his bleeding hooves. "He cracked my hooves." Roronoa stomped past them, drawing Kitetsu. "I don't know what's worse, the fact this idiot has knocked me to the ground 3 times tonight, or that he's not taking this seriously." "He's not," Tony gasped. "He's not," Brooke echoed. "While Runo-san appears to be adept at handling multiple opponents at once, he's just playing our actions against each other, for the most part. He's not trying to win." "Well, give the criminals a prize," Runo interrupted. "You figured me out." The pirates looked at him and all grit their teeth. Runo was standing smugly across from them, only now he had his foot firmly planted on Usopp's back and a gun pointed at his head. "Any sudden moves and I'm taking Sniper King here out of the game, if you catch my drift," Runo threatened. "It's not like there's not another one here on the island we can turn in. If anyone feels like saving me, that would be fantastic," Usopp pleaded, wriggling as he tried to free himself. The Straw Hats glared at their enemy, daring him to even attempt to kill the sniper. For if he did, stealth be damned, they were killing him. "Anyway, Devil Child gets a prize for recognizing my fighting style." I was using it against the swordsman too. Runo raised an eyebrow. Though I'm kind of curious as to why you all didn't know ahead of time. You have the princess with you, right? My style of martial arts was common knowledge in Alabasta, so she should have told you. A vein went off in Rorinoa's forehead. Wait, don't tell me she actually. I should have mentioned it earlier, sandstorms are another of the desert's dangers. I'm so sorry. I should have mentioned this earlier. Warasagi birds are desert bandits that deceive travelers and steal their belongings. I'm sorry, I guess I must have forgotten to mention that Sandora dragons always hunt in pairs. Damn it, Vivi, Rorinoa yelled. Can't you remember to tell us anything? Tony, Brooke, and even Usopp shushed him. Robin just shook her head. She had heard from her time's Nami that Vivi occasionally forgot to warn her friends of impending dangers, but she never thought it would happen at such a critical time. I have no idea what you mean, but whatever. Where was I? Runo sucked on his cheek, then smiled. Oh, right. Prizes. Soul King and Pirate Hunter get one for noticing I wasn't trying to win. Despite popular belief, I'm not stupid. I know that if I took this seriously, I wouldn't be able to defeat all four of you, in an actual fight, anyway. Hey, what about me? Usopp protested, don't ignore the great. Runo stomped on his back, making him shut up. But like the younger pirate hunter told my sister earlier, I really don't have to beat you to win this game. If I wanted to win, I would have just hypnotized you from the start. Runo went on as if Usopp never interrupted. I just had to play your actions off each other, toy with you, so to speak, and have fun testing your abilities. You're stalling us, Robin observed coldly. Why? Are you waiting for your comrades to awaken? No, I was putting that off. Yari would get on my case for not using my powers more against you. She doesn't realize that hypnosis isn't really good for hand-to-hand combat aside from making your opponent hesitate or miss. Then why bother? Usopp grunted in pain. Runo shrugged. Like I said, just hypnotizing you into submission would be too easy and I wanted a fight. Then why stall? Robin asked. Does it have to do with what you keep doing with your eye? I was wondering about that as well, Brooke admitted. You heard them, Rorinoa said harshly. Be Mr. Talkative and tell us. Tony nodded in agreement. Runo chuckled and tucked his bangs behind his ear. His eye was lit up again. Fine. You see, I'm mentally connected with whomever I hypnotize. Some time ago, I discovered that by combining my Kenbunshoku haki with my hypno abilities, I could see what one of my toys was seeing. I can only do it when I'm concentrating, though. That's why I kept pausing our fight. You can see what Sanji, Nami, and Frankie see? Tony asked incredulously. No, I can only do one at a time. I'm looking through Blackleg's eye at the moment. You wanted to know why I'm stalling, right? Their silence was answer enough. Let me answer with the introduction of another game. Runo tapped his foot on Usopp's back and formed a circle around his glowing eye with his fingers. I spied with my little eye. A group of fools who thought they could hide. Naturally, I sent my toys to go seek. Now, any ideas as to what I spied? Robin's eyes widened in realization. Oh no. What? Who is he talking about? Rorinoa barked at her. Luffy and the others. The archaeologist shouted. He sent our hypnotized crewmates after them. What? Brooke, Tony, and Usopp squealed. Sweat. They had played right into that jelly-boned freak's hands. Runo smirked. Good answer. With that, the hypnotist plugged one ear, pointed his gun up towards the sky, and fired. Location. Ridge above the bounty hunter camp time, several minutes earlier. Luffy placed his hands on his hips, grinning. Ready? Do it, Chopper and Lysop chanted. Qua qua, qua qua. Karoo chanted along with them. Luffy nodded. He crossed his arms, closed one eye, and scowled. Stop being so predicable and maybe I'll let you, the rubberman said gruffly. Chopper, Karoo, and Lysop burst out laughing, rolling around on the ground and holding their stomachs. Oh my gosh, that was perfect, Lysop gasped out. You sounded just like Rorinoa, Chopper added. Do another one, do another one. Karoo nodded in agreement. Qua, okay then. Robin impression. Luffy took on a placid expression with an eerily calm smile. Even his eyes seemed to look like the archaeologist's. A statue this size would undoubtedly sink your ship and drown you all. This new impersonation sent Luffy's audience into a round of hysterical giggles. Meanwhile, Nami and Vivi watched them with varying emotions. Nami crossed her arms. Why do they have to act like little kids? We're in the middle of a rescue mission here. Leave them be, Vivi sighed, patting her shoulder. They're just trying to lighten the mood. Now is not the time to lighten the mood. It's the time to remain vigilant. Who knows when a bounty hunter will wake up and find us? Vivi smiled weakly and pointed to the side. Normally I would agree with you, but I think a certain someone is being plenty vigilant for the whole group. She was referring to Sanji, who was kneeling next to the ridge with Lysop's telescope held to his eye. He hadn't moved from that spot since Roronoa's group left almost half an hour ago. How's everything going down there, Sanji? Nami asked. Well, nothing's exploded yet, I can tell you that much, Sanji said, lowering the instrument. We're too far away and since they put out the campfires it's just too dark to get an accurate picture of the situation. Keep trying anyway, I don't want any surprises. Of course, Nami Swan. There won't be a surprise attack on my watch. He turned back to his spyglass, and not even a second later he paled. Oh crap, I think there's been a surprise attack. What? Hearing Nami's shriek, the Goofy trio and Karoo quit their silly game and joined the girls next to Sanji. What's going on? Did something happen with Zoro-san and the others? Luffy asked. Yeah, it's difficult to tell from here, but I'm pretty sure one of the lieutenants woke up, Sanji answered, tense. Lysop's jaw dropped. Already? Which one? Which one? Sanji adjusted the lens. I can't get a clear visual, but it looks like the lieutenant has purple hair. Geez, Lysop, you need to get a better telescope. This thing's a piece of crap. Hey, I've had that telescope since I first started this voyage. Focus, boys, Vivi interjected. If the lieutenant has purple hair, that narrows it down. It either Yari or Run. No. What's wrong, Vivi? Chopper asked. I completely forgot. The princess despaired. I should have mentioned this earlier, but Runo is a master of dancing cobra fighting style. It's a rare and very lethal Alabastan martial art that almost no one knows. Since he's so naturally flexible, he can utilize it to its full extent. It's especially good for evasion and sudden, powerful attacks. Mr. Roronoa and the others won't know how to prepare for it. Seriously, Vivi? Lysop shouted. We've talked about this. You have got to remember to start telling us crucial information. I know, I'm sorry. Relax, Vivi. It'll be okay, Luffy said confidently. Zoro-san, Chopper-san, and Robin can handle one bounty hunter. They also have Brook with them now. Besides, our plan is rescue, not going all out. They just need to grab our Nakama then get past Nerve Girl or the hippo guy. They can handle it. Runo isn't a hippo, Luffy, Lysop, Nami, and Chopper said together, waving one hand each. We'll talk animals later. Right now, we should move to a different location, Sanji said, giving Lysop his spyglass back. There is definitely a fight going on down there, and who knows how long it'll be before everyone wakes up and send lackeys out to find the rest of us. They're going to come after us, Chopper gasped. Only if Robin and Tony let Roronoa, Brook and my younger self get too noisy, which I will admit is likely, Lysop said. Or if they let that lieutenant wake everyone else up. Phooey! That high-pitched whining was followed by a brief explosion in the sky above the camp suddenly being filled with a bright red light. Whoa, where did that star come from? Luffy shouted, adjusting his hat so it would shield his eyes. That's not a star, it's a signal flare, Nami shouted, shielding her own eyes. The bounty hunter must have shot it. Stop jinxing us all the time, Lysop, Chopper barked at the sniper, whacking his arm. Lysop his abused limb. Ow, what the heck are you talking about? Boys, Vivi scolded. Not now. Sanji ignored this series of exchanges, focusing on the flare. There was no doubt it was launched with a purpose, but for some reason he didn't think it was just to wake up the camp. While bright and loud, it didn't seem like enough to do the trick. I have a bad feeling about this, the chef thought. And like anyone else who had thought this at one point or another, Sanji was right to have that bad feeling. Vivi had been trying to wrangle everyone together to move and failing, since Chopper and Lysop had kick-started a group argument when she noticed something strange. Guys, the princess piped up. What? Everyone except for Sanji hollered at her. She pointed up. Are bubbles supposed to be black and sparky? The crew's heads simultaneously snapped upward to see the black, sparky bubbles. Lysop paled but reacted almost immediately. He grabbed Chopper and Luffy by the back of the shirts and started running. Run, now. Sanji picked up Nami and Karoo, threw Vivi onto his saddle, and then proceeded to follow after the sniper. This was done not a moment too soon. As soon as they got off the ledge and started down the path, the bubbles popped and a pillar of lightning crashed down on where they had been only seconds before. Rocks went flying and the shockwave nearly sent the group sprawling. They didn't stop running, but they did look back at the damage. There was nothing left of the ledge save blackened stone. What the hell was that? Nami hollered, looking over Sanji's shoulder. You, Lysop replied, letting go of Chopper and Luffy so they could run for themselves. What? Before Lysop could clarify, the group found their path suddenly cut off. So suddenly that they ran right into the obstacle and went tumbling backward. Damn, Sanji yelled, rubbing his face. What did we hit? Vivi and Karoo recovered and looked. The former paled. Oh no, not again. The new obstacle in their path was none other than Frankie, standing rigidly before them with blank, glassy eyes. The fireworks have begun. Now we play, the cyborg said coldly. Sanji grit his teeth together and put a protective arm around Nami. Lysop looked distraught, but he pulled out his black kabuto to be safe. Vivi gulped and clutched Karoo's reins. Chopper entered heavy point and took a defensive stance. As for Luffy. Awesome. The Rubberman shrieked in delight. It's a robot. A real, live robot. He's a cyborg, Lysop snapped. He's also your currently brainwashed, bloodthirsty shipwright. My shipwright is an awesome robot, Luffy went on. I can't wait for the future. Are robots really that cool? Chopper asked, temporarily forgetting about the danger. Of course. They're part of a man's romance. Wow. Don't ignore the part about him being brainwashed, Sanji, Nami, and Lysop yelled. Vivi would have shaken her head in exasperation if she weren't so weren't. She wouldn't have had the chance to. She and Karoo suddenly found themselves being shoved to the side by the moron in question. Luffy raised his arm and the princess saw the skin on his forearm ripple, as if something were hitting it. Approximately 1 second later, the captain's body was overcome with a blast of electricity. Luffy! Vivi cried out. Quaw, Karoo added. The group turned away from the cyborg in time to see Luffy get shocked and discover the attacker was a woman who seemed to appear out of thin air. They would have cried out as well if the electricity hadn't cleared to reveal the Rubberman was completely fine. Vivi's would-be assailant tried to stab at Luffy with her staff, but he blocked each strike and then lightly kicked her back. It was then that the crew finally got a good look at her cold eyes reflecting the red light of the now dimming flare. The staff's wielder was a young woman with orange hair who was wearing a gothic Lolita dress. Luffy smiled. Hey, Nami. Nami, or rather future Nami, tilted her head to one side blankly. How did you know I was there? I don't know how you were see-through, but I saw something shimmery behind Vivi and decided not to risk it. Luffy replied vaguely. He grinned. It's still cool though. I bet our Nami can't wait to learn how to do that. The group save Lysop, who was paling at an alarming rate, stared at the future navigator in disbelief. It was one thing to see Frankie, they didn't really know him save for Vivi. But to see an older version of Nami when their times was with them. That's the future me. Nami gasped. She frowned. What the heck am I wearing? What, do I suddenly lose my taste in clothes? It looks very good on you, Nami Swan, Sanji complimented, ogling the older navigator. Like a princess. I am a princess, and even I wouldn't wear something like that, Vivi said numbly, trying to ignore the fact she'd nearly been electrocuted. Maybe Yari got to her. I have a better question, how come Luffy isn't dead? Chopper squealed. He was just electrocuted. He's made of rubber, Lysop said, switching between aiming his kabuto at Nami and at Frankie. Rubber doesn't conduct electricity. Trust me, it's going to come in handy. Awesome, Luffy crowed. Such noisy playmates, future Nami said in monotone. She held out her staff, but playmates nonetheless. Master doesn't want us to play here though, Frankie added. He wants us to play with everyone else. The crew did not like the sound of that. Everyone else probably meant those in the camp below. Lysop, if there's anything you can tell us about their abilities, Now would be a good time, Sanji said cautiously. I have a hunch this is one of those fight because we have no other choice kinds of instances. He glanced down. Unless we all want to jump off the ledge. The group all looked over the side of the trail, where the jungle and the camp lay far, far, far below. I vote for fighting, Nami shouted. Ditto, Vivi agreed. I third that, Chopper said quickly. Qua, Karoo declared. Luffy frowned sourly at this. He had said earlier he didn't want to know what his future Nakama could do because they would be avoiding them at all costs. Only now they couldn't avoid them. So what to do? They could jump off the ledge, but then they'd end up in the camp. The camp was where all the bounty hunters resided, including Vampire Guy. But if they stayed here and fought Robot Guy and Nami-Osan, it probably wouldn't end well even with a future crewmate with them. Luffy hated this island. Ever since they'd come here he'd done nothing but think. It was exhausting. Narrowing his eyes, the rubberman turned his attention back to his friends. Are you all out of your minds? Lysop was hollering. We can't fight here. We have no room to move whatsoever. We'd all probably fall off anyway. They're hypnotized. Can't you just hit their temples with your slingshot and free them? Nami yelled. I'm fast, but so are they. In the time it would take me to disable one, the other would obliterate us. Some protection, you are. Luffy groaned to himself. He guessed there was only one thing left to do. Oi, Nami-Osan, Luffy shouted all of a sudden. Who are you calling an old man? Nami and Sanji shouted at their captain. Yes, future Nami answered. Don't answer to that, Nami scolded her older self. Nami-Osan, can you get us down the mountain and to Zoro-Osan and the others? He smiled innocently. You wanted us to play with them, right? His friends all stared at him like he was insane, which he probably was. Luffy, what are you doing? Chopper said. We're not supposed to go down to the camp. But if we're there, then we can at least get the rest of the future crew's help, Luffy reasoned. Those of us from the past could even slip out in all the fighting and confusion. I did that once in a restaurant with Ace when we had to dine and dash. Having heard about Ace earlier, Nami, Vivi, Sanji, and Chopper were wondering just what kind of influence he had on his younger brother. Then again, they were both pirates, so maybe it was to be expected. Deal, future Nami said before there could be any more protests. Sanji. There wasn't any time to respond. 1 second they were standing on the mountain path. The next a black blur came spinning from above and crashed into them. The path shattered and the group went sailing into the air. Sanji was the first to look down. Floating where there had once been stone was a tall man wearing a suit, smoking a cigarette. He had eyes as glassy as future Nami and Frankie's, but there was no mistaking that face. Okay, I might have to apologize to Mosshead, Sanji thought as he gazed upon his elder self. That is really freaky. Luffy, you moron. Nami was screaming, clinging onto Lysop for dear life. Sorry, this was our best option, Luffy apologized. Wait, what is future Nami doing? Chopper shouted. While they were still in the air, future Nami had broken her staff into 3 sections and was pointing one up at them. At the end of the section was a clear bubble. What is that, more lightning? Vivi asked. Quow, Karoo yelled. Lysop grit his teeth. He recognized that bubble. The pirates finally started to come down, and future Nami spoke. Perfect Cleam attacked. Gust sword. Location. Center of the bounty hunter camp. Time. Back when Runo fired the flare gun, the Straw Hats stared up at the glaring red flare, then shift their focus back to Runo. The bounty hunter looked extremely pleased with himself. What? He asked, spinning the flare gun on his finger. Do you have any idea how many times I've accidentally shot my men? The others would trust me with a real gun about as far as they could throw me. He paused, grinding his foot into Usopp's back thoughtfully. Actually, that's a pretty bad analogy. They could all throw me pretty far. At any rate, it doesn't matter. You guys didn't call my bluff and the others get to join the game. Sure enough, there were now shouts of alarm echoing across the camp. The lackeys were on the move, and the other lieutenants wouldn't be far behind them. They wouldn't be surprised if Carrion himself showed up. I don't believe it, Robin muttered in irritation, squeezing Tony a little. He played us, again? Roronoa ground out. Like a harp, Reno said with satisfaction. He grinned his snaky grin. First my little cave ambush, then our fight, and now this. You straw hats are making this way too easy for me. I provide bait and you respond. I make a little threat and you respond. No wonder your captain failed so miserably at Marineford, if he's anything like you, so freaking weak and emotional. Usopp didn't know what Runo was talking about, but by the way his future crewmates now looked unbelievably angered, it was bad. Robin looked like she wanted to snap Runo's neck. Tony looked ferocious. Brook was gripping his sword so hard the sniper could have sworn cracks were appearing in the bone, and Roronoa. Wait. Where did Roronoa go? The weight on USN an instant. When he looked up, he saw Roronoa making a lightning-fast assault on the feral freak, both looking demonic in the dimming light of the flare. This time though, Runo was the one on the ropes. It looked like it was taking all his willpower to keep up and guard with his wristbands. Whoa ho ho, Runo laughed as he blocked. A little touchy, are we? Usopp got up and ran as fast he could to the others. In his sprint, he managed to catch a glimpse of Roronoa's face. On the outside, it was utterly calm. Tranquil, even. The facade was shattered when you looked into his eyes though. In that one dark eye, there burned white-hot, unadulterated, unspeakable fury. You're fast when you're angry, Runo was saying. He frowned, then again. The hypnotist ducked and sucker punched the swordsman in the stomach. So's my sister. Roronoa coughed out a worrying amount of saliva and bile and jumped back, sounding as if he were trying to hack up his lungs. Runo chuckled to himself. If you're reacting this badly, maybe I should tell the younger Straw Hat about this. I'm sure he'll love to hear what an utter failure he's going to be. He frowned. Don't get cocky. Just because you all managed to piss off Big Mom doesn't change the fact you all got wasted at Sabodi and Marineford. No one is going to forget that. Usopp wanted to so badly to ask what he was talking about, but he was afraid to. He'd never seen Tony, Brook, or Roronoa look so pissed. He'd only met Robin that one time on the Mary, but she'd had been the epitome of unshakable confidence, then seeing her furious made her even more scary. This information probably fell under the future, and Luffy didn't want them to know about that. Usopp decided he didn't want to know either way. He already had enough negative expectations of the future, he didn't need to add on to the list. Roronoa coughed one more time then grinned. I'm the cocky one? Look at your arms, dumbass. Runo gained a puzzled expression, then his eyes widened. His metal wristbands shattered and long cuts appeared on his arms, squirting blood. What do you know? He's just like his sister, Brook commented without humor, so slow on the uptake. Runo blinked once, then twice, then opened his mouth. Sweet Mother C. Note. The series of expletives and insults that spewed from his mouth were so crude and inappropriate that the author does not feel comfortable writing them out. Let's skip to the end. With a cockatiel and damn SXU ally repressed Sandora Dragon, Runo finished, afterwards biting his lip in pain and hugging his arms to his chest. Is he done? Tony asked, looking up at Robin. Robin removed the bloom hands she had sprouted to cover the reindeer's ears. I believe so. I think my ears are bleeding. Or they would be, if I had ears, Brook said, rubbing the spots on his skull where his ears would have been. Usopp shuddered. If his innocence had not yet been ruined, it was now. So what was that about not having to win? Because you might want to consider changing that plan. Roronoa taunted with a sadistic smile on his face. Forget him, Roronoa, Robin shouted. We need to get to the others. Lysop is good, but I don't think he can handle our Sanji, Nami, and Frankie alone, and we know he's not going to want the others to fight. Go on ahead, Roronoa told her. I'll stay here and finish him off, find my younger self, and get Brook and Usopp's weapons. Robin knew better than to argue with him, so she sighed and nodded. Okay, just don't get lost. Roronoa nodded and charged Runo, only to stop dead in his tracks with a shout. Gah! Roronoa-san, Brook shouted. Every vein in Roronoa's body bulged. Then, slowly and painstakingly, Roronoa stood up straight and sheathed his swords. The swordsman appeared to be fighting the actions he was taking, but couldn't stop himself. Bloody puppet Trancel Waltz, came a deep voice. Let's put away those swords, shall we? The Straw Hats, the ones not having their blood manipulated, snapped their heads to the side. There stood Enoch Vaughn, moving his fingers like a puppeteer. Arati and Baba Yari stood next to him, both looking tired and not at all pleased. And surrounding them on all sides was the rest of the camp's inhabitants, each armed and ready to murder whoever had disturbed their sleep. "Ah! The vampire guy!" Usopp and Tony screamed, recognizing him from the cavern and from the forest respectively. "How did all these hunters surround us without us noticing?" Brook yelled. It may have had something to do with their only crewmate with them that could use haki being distracted and affected by the island's haki dampening effect, but Robin felt that was obvious, so she said nothing. Vaughn shrugged and released his grip on Roronoa, who fell to his knees gasping. "I am never going to get you guys to stop calling me that, am I?" he muttered in defeat. The pirates ran to their crewmate as Runo stumbled to join his teammates. Robin let Tony down from her arms to check on the green-haired man. "Roronoa, are you okay? How do you feel?" the doctor asked frantically. "Like I got used as a human meat puppet. Other than that, I'm good," Roronoa grunted. Now that that was out of the way, the group turned their focus back to the lieutenants, all taking defensive stances. Save for Usopp, who hid behind Roronoa. "It's the middle of the night, there are pirates in the camp. Runo shot off a signal flare to inconsiderately wake us up, and we arrived to find him bleeding profusely," Arati observed. She sighed, glanced Yari. "It's just like your last birthday, only there aren't any strippers." Yari sneered at her before walking over to her brother. "Look at you, Runo. I like a good fight as much as you do, but you really should have stopped this before it even began." "Shut up," Runo grunted. He held out his arms. "Like Arati said, I'm kinda bleeding profusely here." Vaughn rolled his eyes and snapped his fingers, blood clot. The blood that left Runo's body now reabsorbed back into the cuts and scabbed over. "Whoa," Runo said, impressed. "Thanks, man. Just don't say I never did anything for you," Vaughn replied. "By the way, we heard your little rant back there. You kiss your mother with that mouth?" Runo scoffed. "Who do you think I inherited it from?" They were acting so casual in front of them. They were really confident that the Straw Hats weren't a threat. That was actually a little insulting to them. "Enough of that," Arati interrupted. "What are we going to do with the pirates? Fighting them here isn't a good idea, we might wake up Carrion. Remember what happened last time we did that?" All the lieutenants shivered. "The brig was so cold," Yari whispered. "We'll be fine," Vaughn assured them. "That time it took 10 thrust upstreams, a Sea King attack, and Runo blowing up our entire stock of gunpowder. A measly free for all brawl shouldn't rouse him." "Whatever," Arati conceded. "Let's get started then." The Straw Hats got ready. Looked like there was going to be a big battle whether they liked it or not. "Hold on, not yet," Runo broke in. "Give it a second." "Ah, do you guys hear something?" Usopp asked anxiously. "Ah, it sounds like screaming," Tony guessed. "Screams of absolute terror, to be precise," Robin added. "Ah, from above us," Brook said, looking up. "Ah." The Straw Hats looked up only to be crushed by something big, round, and rubbery. It made a rather impressive dust cloud, and when it cleared. "Damn it, Luffy," Roronoa hollered. It appeared that, to break everyone's fall, Luffy had initiated Gum Gum Balloon. He quickly deflated, letting Sanji, Nami, Chopper, Vivi, Karoo, and Lysop fall to the group in a heap. She. That was actually pretty fun," Luffy laughed. "Let's do it again." "Not on your life," Sanji, Nami, and Lysop all yelled, jumping to their feet and smacking their captain. Brook helped Vivi to her feet. "Vivi-san, are you all right?" "I'm fine," she said, rubbing for dropping in, literally. Karoo pecked her shoulder for making a bad pun. "The future crew showed up and future Nami blew us off the mountain," Chopper explained to their comrades. "Thanks for warning us that I can control weather in the future," Nami scolded. The bounty hunters, hearing this, turned to stare at Runo. "Did you time that?" Vaughn asked, bewildered. Runo smirked and pointed his thumb at his chest. "Master Planner, remember? You may now bury me in shameless praise." "Not on your life." Meanwhile, the newly arrived Straw Hats were still beating on Luffy. "You idiot," Lysop was saying. "We should have escaped, not let them drive us into the belly of the beast. And here I thought you'd finally gotten more cautious." "Escape where?" Luffy argued. "We were stuck on the mountain and surrounded. You said so yourself. There was no way we could have beaten those guys on our own." Lysop snapped his mouth shut. Okay, you've made a fairly good point. Statistically, it had to happen sometime, Sanji sighed. You're telling me, Lysop sighed. He felt a poke on his shoulder and turned. It was his younger self. Excuse me. Are you my older self? Usopp stuttered. Lysop nodded dumbly. The two snipers stared at each other for several long seconds before freaking out and pointing at each other. I'm so manly, I'm so wimpy. Am I really going to be that awesome? Was I really this pathetic? Ki-ya, 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 ki-ya. Both pirates and bounty hunters watched the exchange with either amusement or exasperation. Huh, he did wig out, Tony said. Now what? I assume we're going to have a big grandiose battle, Bon answered. He smiled amicably at Luffy. Hey, Straw Hat. How are the wounds treating you? Luffy snarled at the red-eyed man. Roronoa placed a hand on his shoulder. Don't let him get to you. I'll handle him, Roronoa whispered in his ear. Luffy scowled but nodded. Zoro-san is going to kick your ass, vampire guy. If you say so, Bon shrugged. Then it's settled? Good, Reno said. He raised his fist to the bounty hunters. Okay. Other than trying not to wake up the boss. The bounty hunters all closed in, forcing the Straw Hats to go back to back. To make matters worse, future Sanji, future Nami, and Frankie seemed to appear out of nowhere and join the hunters' ranks. The Straw Hats all snarled at the sight of their hypnotized Nakama, but there was nothing they could do at that moment. The pirates that had weapons raised them, those that didn't either took a stance or prayed that they would come out of it alive. How could it all go so horribly wrong? Let's go wild. Location. Siobhan's tent. Siobhan opened an eye, hearing the roar of battle start up. It appeared that the rest of the Straw Hat crew had come to save their friends. What a gutsy move. They were just like Captain Sama's crew. Very well then, she said, leaning back in her cage and putting her arms behind her head. Game, start. Next time. Chapter 21. Camp Assault Part 3. Big Brawl Free for All. What's to come? Not necessarily all in the next chapter. Whoever said I was trying to kill you, maybe I was just trying to piss off Straw Hat. My future self did this to you, right, Rokuogan? Give me back my friends. If you all have a very good reason for waking me, now would be the time to tell me it. Let me rephrase that. I'm getting you out of here, and you will lead me to the Leviathan. Princess Piranha Tol Ul Siobhan am I. I'm so evil. See y'all later. Fine. You see, I'm mentally connected with whoever I entrance. So some time ago, I discovered that by combining my Kenbunshoku Haki with my Hypno abilities, I could see what one of my toys was seeing. I can only do it when I'm concentrating, though. That's why I kept pausing our fight. If you recall in Chapter 18, Finding the Rainbow Connection, Runo mentions this ability and says he found Sunny with it. Stop jinxing us all the time, Lysop, Chopper barked at the sniper. Chopper is referring to when Usopp supposedly jinxed the group by saying the island would blow up. Of course, Lysop wasn't there for that, so he has no idea what Chopper means. I have a bad feeling about this. Who has two thumbs and saw The Force Awakens and loved it? This girl. But if they stayed here and fought Robot Guy and Nami-o-san. My sister insisted you'd all think I was stupid or something if I let Luffy called future Nami-o-san. Like maybe I didn't know what the suffix for an old lady in Japanese was. Here's my retort. I do know the suffix for it. It's Obasan. I chose not to use it because the Luffy is the type of guy to use Osan for just about anyone. Do you have any idea how many times I've accidentally shot my men? The others would trust me with a real gun about as far as they could throw me? Runo isn't kidding. If you go back to Chapter 8, curiouser, and curiouser still, Runo did accidentally shoot one of the lackeys. Don't get cocky. Just because you all managed to piss off Big Mom doesn't change the fact you failed so miserably at Sabaody and Marineford. How does Runo know about Big Mom? Let's just say he and Yari have excellent underworld connections and leave it at that. That time it took 10 thrust-up streams. Thrust-up streams are like miniature versions of the knock-up stream, introduced the filler Z's ambition arc.